Okay, so when we left off, we talked about how we can try to think of how do we apply our four principles of efficient grading to the sequence of assigning work. And there's sort of an anatomy here. Depending on who you talk to, they might, say that there's more or fewer steps. But I think that I can break it down into 6 here, and those 6 are choosing what work to assign, choosing the grading criteria, administering the assignment, collecting and assessing grading, providing feedback, and allowing use of feedback. Just for clarity, I might use the terms assignment and assessment interchangeably because really, if you're giving work an assignment, it ought to be some kind of assessment in one way or another, so that you can figure out where the kid is at, or the kid can figure out what goals they've been hitting. So as far as these 6 steps, you might be looking at this and saying, whoa, overkill, like that's so many steps. I just hand them something and they do it. It really does take kind of some consideration in order to save time, grading, and maybe not waste a lot of time spending your energy on things you don't really have to do. I think that it's important to really consider the anatomy of an assignment and what is it, what is our sequence here. And I find that some of our steps of giving an assignment are sort of carelessly executed. For instance, choosing what work to assign. That kind of sounds very basic, but I know that at least when I started teaching, I would give work just because it didn't feel right not to. And I rarely asked, is this work that I'm having them do and complete over the next day or two, is it valuable at all? And so that's where, that's a very obvious one where that first principle is the work valuable comes in. Choosing what work to assign, we need to choose work that's valuable. Choosing grading criteria. Sometimes we're a little careless on this. We give work, and when the student turns it in, we just write a number on it. But what are we really using to judge their achievement? Administering the assignment, collecting, and then providing feedback are usually addressed in one way or another. That probably most teachers are familiar with. But then another one that I think is important is allowing the structured use of feedback. And this is probably the one where we fall on our faces the most as educators. That we might give students all kind of feedback, we might give them all kinds of grades and all kinds of ways for them to figure out where they're at, but we really don't let them work with that feedback. And so we can talk a little bit about that next. But an important thing, just before I show you the table on the front end of giving assignments, is very important if we want to strive for efficiency in our grading. We never want to stop asking questions. Don't stop asking questions about your own practice. Is this working? Is there a better way to do this? Does this actually benefit my students? Is my time well spent? Am I being efficient or not? Sometimes spending a lot of time doesn't mean that you're not efficient. That's kind of different for everyone. Is my original idea any good, or should I change my original idea? Is there someone I can ask for some help? And then, importantly, what evidence do I have that this works? Too many of us kind of stick our heads in the sand and say, well, this is what I've always done, so I'm going to keep doing it. I can name, a half dozen people that I know who do that. But really, we have to ask ourselves, what evidence do we have, either from our experience or from research, that this works? Why should we do it if it doesn't work? So always ask questions about specifically, what are you doing at every step of the process of grading? Is this working? So this table might look a little bit scary at first, but all that I've done here is I've tried to break down, just for the first half of giving an assignment, our first 3 steps: choosing work, choosing grading criteria, and then administering. And then over here I have these other dimensions, our 4 principles of efficient grading. And inside each of these boxes is kind of a question that you should be asking yourself in order to address all of these 4 principles. And so just to run through them really quickly, some of them we talked about already. Choosing which work to assign. Is it valuable or not? If not, don't assign it. Don't even do it if it's not going to be valuable. Too often we give busy work, and that's not just busy for your kids, it's busy for you. So, don't give work if it's not truly valuable. So, that hits our first principle. Grade based on achievement. You should ask yourself, is this work going to demonstrate learning? Are you going to use a rubric? You should. And if it's not going to demonstrate learning, and if you're not going to use a rubric, well, again, you probably shouldn't use that. Classroom time is the most valuable time. So when you're choosing which work to assign, would it be best to assign this to be done in class instead of at home? Classroom time is valuable. Is it better to just give the students an hour, hey guys, let's work on this while, you have each other and you have me? Is that better than saying, here, take this home where you're unsupervised and you don't have anyone to talk to you? So you really have to think through that. Do I want to put this into my lesson plans or just hand it to them? And you should be thinking ahead about what modality you're planning to provide feedback with. You should get feedback. If it's an assignment, that kid should get feedback somehow. And so the best feedback is personalized and verbal. Are you going to give it to them? Are their classmates going to give it to them? Is it going to be written? Is it going to be just spoken? Is it going to have a grade attached? So you should ask yourself those questions before you even put pen to paper or start typing up an assignment. You should ask yourself these questions. Should I even assign this? Choosing grading criteria. In order to make sure that we're assigning valuable work, we have to make sure our criteria assess valuable learning and not learning that is just a lot of fluff. If we're grading based on achievement and using rubrics, exactly which criteria will you accept as evidence of learning? And then how are you going to work that into your rubric? As far as classroom time being valuable, can you observe the grading criteria effectively during class time or not? Can you observe what the students are doing, what they're talking about, and then use that actually for a grade? Can you use maybe discussions as a grade? I don't know. It depends on the work. And then your feedback. When you're thinking of grading criteria, one thing you have to ask yourself is, should there be a grade at all? A grade will negate the effect of feedback. Yes. So you have to ask yourself, if I'm going to give feedback, do I want to undo my hard work by sticking a grade on there? Because that actually reduces the effectiveness of feedback. That's not a terrible sin, but you have to think about how much time you're putting into it, and are you canceling out all your work by doing that? Administering. What will you do in order to ensure that learners know that this work is valuable? They need to know that you're giving them valuable stuff. So when you hand them the work or when you scaffold the work for them, they should see how this is valuable. How? How are they going to see that? In terms of achievement, when you're administering the assignment, to what extent have you made it clear to learners how the work will be assessed? They need to know that they're going to be graded on achievement and not just hard work or effort. In terms of classroom time being valuable, what scaffolding or preparations will students engage in? That's on you. In order to make sure that your students are prepared to do the work, you need to make sure that you're scaffolding in such a way, using that good classroom, valuable classroom time to make sure that they're ready for it. Whether or not they take it home to do it or they do it in class or something, they need to be ready for that. So when you give the assignment, you have to make sure you do that in a way that uses valuable classroom time as well. And then, what are your learners going to expect in terms of a grade or feedback? Don't tell them it's for a grade if it's not. I think that a lot of teachers use this as a threat. When students will ask, is this graded? Teachers will say, either yes and lie, or yes and tell the truth, or say, oh, I don't know, maybe. And that's really not helpful. I think that students really do need to know, is this for a grade or not? That's really doing everyone a disservice to not do that. But I will just say that since I have really been making use of this way of asking questions about, is my work valuable? Is it based on achievement? How am I using classroom time, and how is feedback used? Students don't ask me this anymore. They don't ask me if something is for a grade. They don't ask me, oh, how many points is this out of? I've not been asked this almost even one time this year. And it's because of the way that I choose work, choose grading criteria, and administer assignments. Students know that everything they do is valuable, so to them, to be totally honest, it doesn't really matter to them whether it's for a grade or not. They just need to be ready for that quiz or ready for that test. And that is a positive culture in which students aren't grade grubbing. They're not worried about, oh, gee, if this isn't for a grade, I'm not going to do it. And just to kind of put an end cap to Module 2, sort of a bookend, let's go ahead and take a look at some case studies, which I will begin handing out here. I have some case studies for you, and I want you to read these. And for each case study, I want you to identify ways that the instructor makes decisions that are consistent with the 4 principles of grading efficiency, and ways that they make decisions that are not consistent with the 4 principles. For each decision that's not consistent, explain how they would be able to address that shortfall and improve his or her efficiency, and then be prepared to share your ideas.